I haven't been drinking, but I feel like this has quickly become our crassest and most coarse episode, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I was expecting a lot of beeps. I prepared for that ahead of time.
How did you prepare for that? Did you stretch? I don't understand.
So before we get into this week's episode, we've got a little bit of follow-up from recent shows. We have our own little mystery in terms of what happened to Cry Wilderness's director after he left Hollywood and how he suddenly popped up in a special thank you in Sleepless in Seattle. Adam, do you want to fill our listeners in?
So something we found from the Baltimore Sun, no less, is a story that has the headline, "When Efron Met B-More." And it details that Jay Schlossberg Cohen was like the former head of the Maryland Film Board. I guess the reason why he got a special thanks is that since that film, I really want to say You Got Mail, but it's Sleepless in Seattle, since it was shot partially in Baltimore, he got a shout out because he probably worked on that or, got some filming permits and things like that or offered some advice to them prior to completion of that movie. Now, the link to this Baltimore Sun article will be in the show notes, but Beth, Chris, did either of you guys read the full article by any chance?
I did not.
Okay, so I'm just going to scroll down here so I get the exact wording because there's a couple of unrelated pieces. And this caught my eye. The very last line of the article is this: "MCing the festivities will be Jerry Sandusky."
Oh,
yep.
Oh dear.
So, there's just as there can be like nice little moments that are caught in time, like when Jay Schlossberg Cohen was head of the Maryland Film Board, you could also get uncomfortable reminders of criminals hiding in plain sight. But now, Beth, what did Cohen do after he retired?
He became an artist of a sort.
Please tell me it's just like paintings of raccoons.
Mostly.
Oh no.
Yeah, there's a lot of landscapes. Look, I'm not an artist myself, and he has a lot of skill, but he has a very unique technique. And he uses a lot of colors, and his artistry had no impact on me whatsoever.
I hope he uses that as the pull quote for his website.
He makes a pretty picture.
There we go. Yeah.
I hope he gets a lot of satisfaction out of it.
Now that his Cry Wilderness and Sleepless in Seattle days are behind him, but that's not the only bit of follow up that we have, because none other than a sweet old tweet from Mamie Van Doren came at us, in which she says, "Thank you, XOXOXO," or what have you. I'm paraphrasing there. But she seemed to like the fact that we sung her praises in our last episode about Girls Town.
Yes, thank you, Miss Van Doren.
This time we looked at Season 3, Episode 11, It Conquered the World.
But first, the short is a supercharged promo for winter sports. Bobsledding, skating, dog sledding, and skiing.
And skiing is the correct pronunciation, they tell us.
Yeah, well, you're full of skit.
Which seems like a 1950s version of skiing without poles. This includes an extremely dangerous-looking hands-free version of ski jumping, in which almost all the contestants have extremely painful-looking crashes. But everyone, even the critically injured, is clearly having the best time of their lives, and we should all listen to our mothers and get outside more.
And now your feature presentation. Excitement surrounding a satellite launch is interrupted by a High Plains scientist. Science man, who are you? Why, it's Lee Van Cleef as Dr. Tom Anderson. He warns the space program bigwigs that humankind is unwelcome in outer space because a pickle from Venus told him so. Even in the face of this overwhelming evidence, the launch goes ahead. After that embarrassing outburst, Dr. Tom invites the head of the satellite project, Paul Nelson, played by Biography's Peter Graves, over to his place to Skype with his outer space pal. The call won't go through because the Venusian has commandeered Nelson's satellite and crash-landed on Earth. This is our conqueror, a pickle boy from beyond the moon who shits out real-life bats. One bite from Pickle Boy's butt bats turns normal citizens into vegetables, as in slaves, not pickles. Pickle Boy uses his powers to shut down watches, cars, and hydroelectricity for everyone save Dr. Tom. Nelson starts putting the pieces together, but it's too late. His wife has fallen prey to butt bats and is under Pickle Boy's control. Nelson shoots her dead and kills the butt bat intended for him. In our next doomed wife subplot, Dr. Tom's wife, Clara, played by Roger Corman veteran Beverly Garland, drives out to the desert with pistol in hand. Clara chews out the pickle for stealing her man and fills its dumb Venusian ass with lead, but there's no stopping it. Since the ham radio is always on in Dr. Tom's house, he hears his wife being murdered, and it occurs to him that maybe his mind-control pickle friend doesn't have our best interests at heart. Doctors Tom and Nelson track down Sweet Pickle Boy and gun him down with the aid of the military. Dr. Tom is killed during the battle, and Nelson eulogizes his friend, but not his wife.
He learned almost too late that man is a feeling creature. And because of it, the greatest in the universe.
Will Earth be visited again by power-mad denizens of the produce aisle? Only time will tell.
In the host segments, we start off with a prologue in which Joel is trying out for Star Search as a ventriloquist, referencing Jeff Dunham's bit about a woozle whose name is Peanut, thus confusing fans for years. In the invention exchange, the Mads have a rather ghoulish idea for a last-minute Halloween costume. Nooses. Meanwhile, Joel attaches headphones to a conch shell and makes a Sony Seaman. Get it? Because of the Sony disc. Anyway, in the next segment, Tom imitates the high-energy announcer of the short, as Crow and Joel pretend to be, among many other things, Hoosiers playing a rowdy game of hockey ball. In segment 3, Joel and the bots imitate the dry humor of the two couples from the movie, but the quips get personal fast.
No, the coffee wasn't half as bad as the dinner.
Well, I only burn it when you come home drunk.
No, so you burn it every night.
In segment 4, the SOL crew discuss famous celebrity siblings. Crow and Servo tire of the exercise quickly, but Joel quietly urges them on, noting in a very turn-to-camera moment that the movie this week was on the short side, so they need to pad out the bit. In segment 5, Joel and the bots rewatch Peter Graves' climactic speech.
He learned almost too late that man is a feeling creature.
As do Dr. Forrester and TV's Frank.
Shh! Man is a feeling creature.
And then the speech plays over the credits.
He learned almost too late that man is a feeling creature.
And then it plays again as the stinger.
He learned almost too late that man is a feeling creature.
What did you think of this episode, man?
I hated it.
All right. Shut down the podcast. We're done.
I think you actually like this, so why don't you tell me what I'm getting wrong?
Oh no, I enjoyed. I would put it this way: I enjoyed the episode overall. I think that It Conquered the World and like the riffs in Conquered the World was like, yeah, this is textbook mystery science. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed most of the sketches, particularly the running bit of playing Peter Graves's "Man is a feeling creature" speech over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. My one qualm with that is I really wish the stinger was the full speech, but they cut it off. And I was like, that's a cheat. I would gladly have trimmed a minute off of anything else in this episode to get that full speech of like a fourth or fifth time. But I will say I was kind of disappointed in the short. The short is what really dragged for me.
Oh, okay.
Like, did you find your interest was kind of ebbing and flowing as mine sort of did, or what?
I would agree that the segments are really good. It's some of Joel's best work in terms of putting together fun little segments. And so if you're going to watch this episode, definitely watch it for just the host segments. I didn't mind the short. It's not one of their best, but I just like shorts generally. This is our first short, we should mention. And I don't know about you, but whenever I was trying to introduce Mystery Science Theater 3000 to other people, I would always use a short.
Now, my question to you is this, because I would, after the first couple of VHS releases, I totally did the same thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious what shorts you picked, or did you choose one or two in particular, or what?
Oh, what is that name of that crazy one?
Is it The Selling Wizard?
No, it's the one with the phones. Once Upon a Honeymoon.
Yes.
That one's incredible.
Yes, that is a very good short. My go-tos were always Body Care and Grooming. Mm-hmm. Why Study Industrial Arts.
Yes, amazing.
And Cheating. Those three. Those are like my favorite shorts that they ever did.
This one is not one I would show to people, but it was cute on its own. But my main issue was with the movie. It was boring, and I didn't feel like the riffs were good, but they were not enough to sustain me for the most part. And I'm sure we'll get into this later, but I don't know if I am on board with thinking Roger Corman is either good enough or bad enough to be worthy of attention. There are some Roger Corman movies I really like. Night of the Blood Beast is one of my favorites, but I just wonder if that's just because the riffing is so good that it brings it to another level. And even that, like, there's some good moments, there's some interesting ideas. The creatures are obviously a lot of fun. But what really did it for me was the lady scientist. So there are, like, I think 4 female characters. One is a soldier lady who I thought was neat, but she has like 2 lines and then she's gone. And then you have the 2 wives, and then you have this lady scientist, and she wakes up from sleeping because they've been stuck in this lab, and she's wearing a nightie, and then she gets strangled. At which point I'm just like, you know what? Fuck this movie. And I know, again, like, looking back at a movie from the 50s, it's kind of unfair, but just the sexual violence and eroticizing her death, she by far gets the most graphic death. And the way that she has to do it in her nightie, and the fact that, like, the wives get relatively dignified deaths, and she, because she's a working woman, gets, like, it just felt very kind of quietly misogynistic. And I'm just like, what? Pass. I'm out.
I think it's interesting you find that the wives' deaths have a certain amount of dignity. I think Beverly Garland brings a lot of dignity to her role in general. And, she goes out fighting because I think she says something along the lines of, like, see you in hell, Space Karen, or whatever the hell she says.
You think you're going to make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first.
While she's firing a Derringer at this stupid looking thing. But she dies with no plan. She's just like, I'm just going to fire at this thing. And I assume that the 6 bullets in this revolver are going to kill this giant monster man from beyond the moon. And it's so silly. And the character decision is not great. But Garland sells it. And she sells, like, I have to say this, and this is we'll get way deep into Roger Corman later on. But one of his biggest assets as a producer and a director is that he's got a really good eye for talent. Like, the cast in this is quite good, I would say, in general. But Beverly Garland kind of steals the show.
She absolutely does. When I say dignified deaths, I'm obviously grading on a sliding scale.
Yeah, because one person gets killed by a fake bat and the other person gets killed by a pickle with claws.
Her death is not wank material. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Hey, you know what? Don't kink shame, okay?
I will say this. Corman does tend to put his female actors in, they work, which is something to see in the 50s. His movies overall, they often have women in roles of responsibility, jobs outside the home. So it's not like I'm completely dismissing his oeuvre. But in this particular case, I was already like, do I like this movie? Do I not? And at that point, I'm just like, nope, don't like this movie.
I understand that. And what's funny, as someone who has seen the way worse and way more sexualized deaths of women in horror movies from the late 70s to the 80s onwards, her getting killed in a nightie didn't register with me. I was like, oh, good. She didn't get killed by a carrot. That must be nice. But, like, when you're used to nasty slasher movie deaths, that seems so tame. So that didn't even register with me. So I find that an interesting point. But Corman tends to favor, like, strong female characters, even if they're not in the lead, and even if they are in a kind of, like, more traditional role. Like, Beverly Garland is a loving housewife. That is an accurate, like, she sticks by Lee Van Cleef, even though everything Lee Van Cleef does is stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
But, like, she comes across as, like, so clear-headed, and she's only standing by him out of love. And she manages to sell that. It's kind of like Mamie Van Doren, actually. Like, she sells her own kind of strength and resiliency, even when she has to, like, break on camera and even behave stupidly on her own, because her kind of first 45 minutes is just her kind of excusing the fact that her husband, who has now been like fired from his job as someone who worked on the Manhattan Project in War II and whatnot, he used to be like a big deal scientist, and now he gets like drunk in his den and talks to his outer space vegetable buddies. But she makes that character pretty strong and pretty interesting. And you know what I have to say, even though I didn't take note of the actress playing Mrs. Nelson, she was also pretty good, but had like a lot less to do. Although she was great in the one scene where she's possessed, because she played that just a little bit off.
Yeah. In
a way that was, I thought, kind of creepy. So that's one of the things I like about Roger Corman, is that he manages to do a lot with nothing. But more on that to come. Beth, what was your favorite moment from this episode, if any?
Beverly Garland, obviously. My favorite part was not when she shoots the creature in the cave. My favorite part is when she decides she's had enough of this shit, and she grabs the rifle from on top of the ham radio. I'm not sure why it was there. And she takes the ham radio and she talks to the creature, and she's like, I'm going to come in, I'm going to kill you. And it's so amazing. I like kick-ass ladies from the 50s, and she is the most kick-ass of all.
That's right. Yeah. For more information on kick-ass 50s ladies, check out episodes 3 and 1 of It's Just a Show.
What was your favorite part, though, Adam?
My favorite part was actually a riff from Joel after Carrot Boy, pickleman.exe, shuts off all the power to everything, and that makes like no sense. I don't know how that happened. But when that happens, the riff from Joel when the Nelsons arrive at the Andersons' place is,
"Hey, your carpeting doesn't work."
That made me laugh.
Nice. In the short, there was a lot of winter sports, and we're Canadian, so we were basically conscripted into doing winter sports in our childhood. Did you enjoy any of that growing up?
No.
No.
Now, if I understand correctly, if I recall from past conversations, Beth, you're more of a sports person than I, as in you will enjoy a sport from time to time.
I like moving my body, which that sounds gross.
Is that on your FetLife profile?
Well, it's just my poor husband has a very demanding job, so his body is basically seized up, and he always says to me, like, I envy your joy of movement. And I hate sports, but I do enjoy doing things like yoga and Pilates and ballet and stuff like that, and I like cycling and all that stuff. So yes, I can move, and I do it, but I hate sports. I've always have. And I'm 6 feet tall, so I really had no choice in playing basketball when I was in high school, and my job was basically to stand under the net and grab the rebounds, and for the love of God, do not dribble, you oaf.
I was very lucky because my brother's 6'9", so he took all the basketball heat from me. I'm forever indebted that he allowed me to dodge that basketball-shaped bullet. But I'm with you, actually. I am an active person, despite looking like a huge sack of crap.
Oh,
but it's true.
But you're a boy, so I feel like you must have been forced to play hockey at least a little bit.
No, my sport that I actually did enjoy, like I'm with you. I'm somewhat active. Like I really enjoy jogging. I love swimming, and when I was a kid, my sport of choice was bowling. But but I quit under protest.
Oh, you're a principled bowler.
Sort of. There was a jukebox at the bowling lane where I used to go as a kid, and this will really, really date me, but there got to a point where I would hear Achy Breaky Heart 3 times a day because people would not stop playing it, and I quit. I quit the junior bowling league team that I was on because no, if I'm going to be in an environment with that song, you have to pay for me to be in a soundproof booth in order to get me to continue. And I quit, and I never bowled again.
I just had this picture of this person-sized booth right in front of the bowling line, and there's a little cat flap at the bottom where the bowling ball comes out.
Yeah, I was really hoping Don Adams would donate his cone of silence to me, but to no avail.
The big bad alien in It Conquered the World uses weird kind of manta ray things to bite people's necks and control their minds. Was this one of the first examples of the body snatcher trope?
As far as I can tell, yeah, because I mean, typically, like the term was used to refer to like literal body snatchers, like the infamous grave robbers, Burke and Hare. I know that short stories, would use the sci-fi trope, or at least that got introduced in pulp stories about mind control parasites and things like that, or mind control mechanics. Of which It Conquered the World kind of has it both ways, because you're never really sure if the bats that our good pickle buddy poops out are alive or mechanical. I'm never certain. To think there aren't that many fine points on this movie. But Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which is surely like the granddaddy or the kind of clearest and best version of that trope. The novel came out in 1955, 1 year before It Conquered the World, which means that Invasion of the Body Snatchers, like the great original 1956 Don Siegel movie, came out at the exact same time as It Conquered the World. And I can only assume like the inspiration was the same, was that Jack Finney novel.
Yeah, there's definitely some similarities there. And of course, Invasion of the Body Snatchers is a classic, and it's known for its inspiration coming from what is generally known as Red Panic, the fear of communism, or other people see it as McCarthyism, like the kind of totalitarian, everybody go in line and act the same. But it's the base of all of these fears is that some malevolent force is going to take over everyone's minds and make them all the same. And so all your individuality is just sucked out of you. But it is plugging into kind of a mythos. I mean, I have to admit, this idea of everyone else being infected by something and then you're the only one left, like that is a dream trope I've had numerous times, where, and that's basically zombies too. This idea of other people just turning into something that is malevolent and it's doing it against their will, and then you end up being one of the only people who still has their own minds. And it's a really powerful modern fear, I think. And because we do have these forces that are capable of that. I mean, just look at North Korea. Like it does happen where even if they don't blindly worship their leader, they at least have to go through the motions.
I was really hoping that when you're going to pull a real life example, you're going to say, just look at Dracula. He bites somebody and he's got a Renfield going around and all those brides of his. But yes, that's very true.
Are you a fan of Rick and Morty?
I am indeed, yeah.
So have you seen the one where they have the creature who takes over an entire planet and she controls all of their minds, and they're way better off for it?
Yes, yeah.
Because they're not fighting with each other anymore. They're all in sync, and it's like the best way to be.
And that seems to be what Lee Van Cleef is getting at here. That's what he wants.
Yeah.
Except instead of like a lady dictator, it's that carrot / pickle. I don't know, space vegetable, whatever the hell he is.
I mean, if it had been better written, it might have been more compelling. But just from the get-go, it's just like you want to take orders from a dying vegetable that can't leave a cave.
And he's got no reason to come to Earth in the first place, except for, as Beverly Garland figures out, just to have an empire, just to have like a potential place to go. Should things not work out on Venus. Mm-hmm. You know what? It's a controversial stance, but I think we can both make it. It Conquered the World does not have a great script.
I would concur.
But I mean, there's something kind of interesting that they pick up, just the idea that you could have this kind of hive mind, because this is like a recurring kind of fear. And I'm glad that you mentioned that bit about dreams and dream logic, because that's also a really frightening thing. I think that's one of the reasons why I say, to use a slightly more modern horror film equivalent, most John Carpenter movies are about loss of individuality, or someone who expresses no individuality committing violence, because we don't know how to handle or communicate with that. But I mean, you see this in a lot of stuff. Like there's Village of the Damned, aka The Midwich Cuckoos, written by John Wyndham.
And of course, The Borg.
Yeah, I was about to say, that's the ultimate hive mind right there, the Borgs who come from the square planet. And I think that, throwing a satirical element on it, we got some really interesting comments from Joel and the Bots where they mention Ayn Rand and Scientology and Ronald Reagan. Mm-hmm. And then weirdly enough, they make reference to John Hinckley, that guy who believed he was getting commands from Jodie Foster, or at least wanted to prove his love to Jodie Foster for assassinating him. And of course, the ultimate cult, the 700 Club.
Indeed. What I find interesting is people who come out of cults and I guess get deprogrammed in a way, they're still the same people. It's just like their like critical switch has been turned on or something. Like this idea that cults completely brain drain you and turn you into an automaton. It's not that. It's just that it's like your ability to conceive of things in a critical way has been diverted or something like that.
Well, I mean, all of us have social needs, or at least most human beings do have some pretty strong needs for not just intimate companionship, but like kind of a societal community to have. And any kind of cult kind of creates that and creates a morality for you to buy into and a set of rules to live by. And without the influence of, living in Jonestown or something, without the influence of that, you have, moral uncertainty and existential despair.
Right.
Whereas, if you're in, like, I can see, even though I find that sort of thing horrifying myself, all of these brains and personalities becoming an amorphous blob and self-castrating in order to get onto Hale-Bopp. There's a very dated comment. But I can also, as strange as it is, like when I was a child, to use that very same example, the Heaven's Gate cult, when I was a child, that seemed so horrifying and crazy to me. But much older now, as a totally old man who lives in a cave himself, not like a carrot boy, I understand why people do it. Like I understand the need, especially where, like, who gets drawn to these kind of cults and cults of personality are like outsiders and loners and people who feel like they've been kind of pushed out of all other forms of significant social interaction. So they have their own little community. It's basically like a really horrifying IRC chat group.
Yeah, I was just going to say, they should really just find podcasts. They're social adjacent.
Yeah, you and I are the friends that live in people's ears.
But I hear you too. Like I grew up going to church, and I have left it, but I do envy like the automatic ritual community you get with that, and the sense that you have a group of people who have your back and who care about your life, and that you can contribute to the building of something bigger than you in some way. It is very hard even if you're getting outside of religion, like the loss of societies, like the Lions and stuff like that, like it's just not as strong anymore. And I think we do see the effects of that.
There's something to be said about the word faith, because it's more than just, I think in, say, religious communities, it's more than just a faith in God, but like a faith in what you have chosen to be your religion, or what you were brought into and raised into, and faith in the other people who share your beliefs and who are in your community, and the idea that you are creating in some form or another like a community together and relying on each other. Like all of that, I think, ties to just faith and the comforts of faith, in addition to its many challenges.
Which ties in a bow. This movie could have pulled on that. Like they could have made the other side seem a bit more compelling, and they never managed to do that. And I think, ironically, because Ayn Rand is brought up in this, I can just remember that being like, she can be very compelling to certain people, but one of her biggest flaws is that she never understood her enemies. She never understood why, in her case, socialism was compelling to people. It was always completely alien to her. And I think this movie has the same flaw. It doesn't understand, or at least it doesn't bring that across, why a hive mind might be compelling.
That's a really good point. And I want to ask you this. How much more compelling and frightening would this movie be if, instead of just living in a cave and having bat minions, the vegetable went door to door handing out pamphlets and managed to convince people to come to its side using the power of oratory? That would be interesting. Mm-hmm. That would be a really frightening thing. It's just, what if that carrot was just super charismatic? Then maybe you'd understand Lee Van Cleef's weird attachment to this space carrot.
Adam, in the summary, you kept calling the alien a pickle. I actually was trying to think about what kind of vegetable this creature most resembled, and I would say a decorative gourd.
Yeah, I can see that. I can very much see that. I like that it kind of looks like the world's worst Christmas tree topper.
And apparently there was some thought behind how it was created. Corman's idea was that because it had to deal with heavy gravity, it would be low to the ground, which is why its face is near the ground. Corman admitted this was a mistake, saying the creature would have been more frightening if it had been taller.
And that's where the cone head came from, right?
Oh, was it? Was that where like SNL got the cone heads idea?
I believe so. But yeah, like this is this thing having its weird cone head was like that last minute thing. Because wasn't it Beverly Garland who was making fun of how the creature looks?
Yeah, apparently when she first saw the creature, she commented, "That conquered the world," and she kicked it over.
I really do hope there was like a stuntman inside who just kind of rolled down Bronson Canyon or whatever.
The creature's working pincers were broken on the first day of shooting, but its arms could still be raised. So that's why they just kind of don't do anything when they're raised into the shot.
I imagine that they couldn't afford extra bulbs, which is why the eyes glow in some scenes, but not others. Have you noticed that? Like they have a weird glow.
Yeah, you're right. Sometimes there's extra effects.
You know, the thing from the planet Venus looks like someone trying to make a jack-o'-lantern out of an eggplant.
The guy who created it, he said, "I called it Denny Dimwit," and somebody else called it an ice cream cone.
And you know, I like this movie has a bit of a reputation for being cornball, and rightfully so. And it's a good experiment for Mystery Science Theater 3000, or a worthy candidate at least. But what's interesting is that there is a remake entitled Zontar, The Thing from Venus, and it uses the exact same script or a slightly revised version or maybe a first draft. I'm not sure because I watched the whole thing and there's some slight differences, a few of which could have been just budgetary. With the remake, Zontar, you have a totally different version of the exact same movie, but it's night and day. It's like Alfred Hitchcock Psycho versus Gus Van Sant Psycho. But you've got Zontar is like a bat creature in a shabbier costume than the reverse ice cream crab clown monster that we get in It Conquered the World. And it's way worse looking.
I admittedly was a little bit more freaked out by the bat creature. Like, it's a lot more grotesque looking.
I admittedly wanted to be pals with the, you know, I see what Lee Van Cleef sees in the It Conquered the World Monster Man, because he looks pretty lovable.
His arms look delicious.
He does. His arms do look delicious. And he's just got that face. He kind of looks like John Polito. Rest in peace.
He kind of looks like Krang.
He does have a Krang quality. And I have to say, watching this, I actually think It Conquered the World was a lot better than the remake that followed 10 years later.
And it does have that, and we'll talk about Roger Corman's skills in a bit, but a truly bad director, I feel like it has its own, like someone like Coleman Francis, it feels hallucinogenic. Like you feel like you're being put into kind of a not very pleasant kind of torpid state when you're watching it. And you got that with Zontar. It just felt like you were floating through sludge the whole time. I totally agree. It's a much worse movie, and it makes you appreciate Corman's journeyman pacing.
Yeah, because here's the thing. Like, It Conquered the World is, even at 71 minutes, is like very weirdly paced and like hides the monster for way too long. And a whole lot of nothing happens in that middle.
A lot of talking.
Tons of it. But the weird thing is that Corman, with the way he shot and with the actors that he chose, you ultimately have, honestly, what feels like a kind of not great overlong episode of The Outer Limits. Like, it's not that different from a lot of like entertainment of the time. It Conquered the World stands out as bad now, I think, for its pacing, but say for the 1950s would have been considered, oh, maybe it's a little slow in places, but is not like outwardly like terrible or strange. It just is like, it's a little slow and it has a bad monster.
Yeah, and as you said in the beginning, like Corman certainly had some talents for picking talent, and that was really noticeable in the Zontar version with the Beverly Garland equivalent. She's very, I hate to use this word because it's so loaded. It's a bit of a gendered slur, but she's shrill. And she, and when she gets into the cave where she's going to basically do Beverly Garland's version of shooting up the creature, she's just so hesitant. The actress's line reading basically goes like this: "I'm going to kill you?
You think you're going to destroy the world? I'll see you in hell first."
Yeah, she should have just like shrugged with the gun. A big question mark comes over her head. Yeah, she delivers everything. The actress in the remake is uncertain and plays, and I guess she's trying to play fear, but it doesn't come across well. Whereas like with Beverly Garland, enough is enough. And you know what? In a better movie, maybe Beverly Garland's like, "I hate you, and I'm going to shoot you all the way back to Venus, and get your hands off my man, you dumb pickle." Like that whole moment would have been the 50s equivalent of "Get away from her, you bitch," from Aliens. But Corman has a real knack, and throughout his entire career has had a real knack for finding talented people who are willing to work for scale. And I'm curious, what exactly did it say in the Amazing Colossal episode guide about Corman? Because surely his name popped up a couple of times.
Oh, yeah. Well, they did a lot of Corman movies, and I think you know more about the Corman oeuvre than I do, but basically he was considered a B-movie director who was most valued because he kept under budget. He was kind of a genius in that way. Mm-hmm. But he has become a very respected director in a lot of ways because of the people that he managed to launch their careers, and the fact that he knew what he was doing in terms of like, I'm making movies for people who are coming to drive-thrus, who are not really interested in like a complex plot and just want some thrills to have an excuse to cuddle up with each other. But the Mystery Science Theater 3000 crew were not having it. And this is from Teenage Caveman, which is another Corman movie. So the Amazing Colossal episode guide. And this is from Mary Jo Pehl. And another thing, let's put an end to all this hooey that Roger Corman is somehow a respectable director just because he gave Jonathan Demme, Tobe Hooper, Joe Dante, Jack Nicholson, and Coppola their first breaks. Roger Corman is a horrible director. Now, it could be argued that he wasn't trying to make good films, just films that came in under budget, but that doesn't nullify the fact that his films are punishingly dreadful. That's funny. I was like, I'm trying to think. It's like, did Roger Corman give Tobe Hooper a break? I can't remember it, but that's in the guide. That's for Mary Jo Pehl to answer for. You know what? Now, having watched this film and any other Corman movies you can recall, where I think listeners to the show who heard our episode on Future War are well aware of your thoughts on Carnosaur. I think it's easy to discern that perhaps you agree with Mary Jo, correct? Yeah, I think I am capable of enjoying like pulp movies, and I don't have to have a certain level of quality. I can enjoy a movie just for the enjoyment of it being pulpy and, kind of schlocky. But I just find maybe Roger Corman just kind of fits into that middle a little bit too much. Like, he just doesn't seem to do enough with the material. And admittedly, I haven't seen a lot of his later work, and I get the sense that that's where maybe he found his groove a little bit more. But in the 50s, I just find like you can tell a Corman movie right off the bat because there's going to be a lot of talking and a lot of walking and a lot of desertscape. Yeah, that sounds like every Aaron Sorkin script. But the dialogue's not good. I would also say that, but that could be argued for every Aaron Sorkin script. Oof. Hot take. I actually love Roger Corman. I love him to bits. I think he's great. Is this one of his better movies? No. In fact, I think of all of the Mystery Science movies, and there's 10 if you count the movies that he produced. Mm-hmm. That they did. They did like 7 movies he directed and 3 that he just produced. And I'd say only one of them represents like a fun movie, a good movie that he did. And that's a wonderfully weird little number called The Undead that they did in the first sci-fi year. I haven't seen that one. Oh yeah, he really exceeds at doing like period piece horror fantasy things. That's why like his Poe movies with Vincent Price are such a treat. I like a lot of his movies. X, the Man with the X-Ray Eyes,
Mask of the Red Death, and Pit and the Pendulum all stick out, as well as like one of his last directed movies, which was something I saw at a 24-hour cult movie film festival, which was called Gas, complete with an extended S like that. That is one of like the weirdest movies I've ever seen. And lastly, a movie of his worth checking out is called The Trip, which was Peter Fonda plays a director who takes acid for the first time whilst making a movie. And in order to understand the story and to offer a balanced view of taking acid, Roger Corman decided to do LSD for the first time whilst making the movie.
Of course he did.
Yeah, and he had his assistant take notes. I'd like to think that this historical fact was the inspiration for the detective taking acid to solve the mystery in, I think it was V for Vendetta. But anywho, I like a lot of his movies, but I do think that Corman's skills are suited more for producing than directing, even though his direction, like, he goes from amateurish to competent. Like, I think in Conquer the World, like I said, is shot like an episode of The Outer Limits. So it's like, it doesn't look bad considering what it is. And you compare it to something like Zontar, The Thing from Venus, which was directed by a total hack by the name of Larry Buchanan, whose movies are just unwatchable. And he takes the exact same material Larry Buchanan does. Like, he has the exact same script. And it's way more boring and harder to follow and has worse actors in it. Nothing about it works. Whereas, like, there's something weirdly, at least I found, there was something weirdly watchable about It Conquered the World, even though this is by no means Corman's greatest hour. But there's no arguing that he had like a real talent for picking the right people to work on the right projects in a lot of the movies that he made.
Well, he's attracted to some interesting ideas, and he had a philosophical bent that I feel like some better writing could bring out a little bit more. And like I said, I do really enjoy Night of the Blood Beast because it's so goofy, and so I wouldn't say that I think he's like untalented or anything like that. I just sometimes find his movies just a little bit dull, and it's only when the riffing is really sharp that they're kind of something that I would seek out on my own. And I think you're right that there was some development, and I think maybe in the 60s and 70s he got a little bit better at pacing and whatnot, and the things that he's really good at were able to come out in more obvious ways.
Absolutely. And I do think that he, like I said, his strengths were as a producer because, and you raised an interesting point, which is that, Corman, and you get this from like most, I'd say, interviews with him, like Corman is a smart and thoughtful guy. And he's like the total opposite of what you would think of like an exploitation filmmaker, because I think what most people would assume is that he's like William Castle, the guy behind a number of strange and fun gimmicky movies like The Tingler, in which Vincent Price finds out that when people are afraid, a tiny little creature crawls up their spine and threatens to kill them, and only screaming can get it out. Which leads to a part in the movie where you're urged to scream out loud so the tingler doesn't get you. But he's not the cigar chomping William Castle gimmick type, and he's more of this sort of like thoughtful intellectual guy. And I think that's why picking sort of like the best students from film school and LA weirdos, like he just found people who were like simpatico to his own beliefs or what he found interesting in material, and were able to realize it better than he did. There's a documentary on him called Corman's World that I would recommend anybody watch, especially if you want to see Jack Nicholson break down and cry.
Whoa.
Yeah. Jack Nicholson gets really teary-eyed thanking Corman for his career because Corman hired him when no one would.
Wow.
Yeah. But he mentioned something about trying to invest something in his material, and you see like the parade of directors that he's worked with, and it's like, oh, obviously like Paul Bartel and Jonathan Demme, who we already mentioned, and a bunch of other directors, like they're more skilled at like storytelling and directing than I think Corman is. But Corman brought them together. Like Corman, he's just got this incredible eye for talent. But what was, because you had mentioned this to me, but I didn't see what it was. I have no idea what it was. Corman actually responded to the unexpected vitriol he got from Mystery Science Theater. Like, what did he say?
So this is on the MST3K Wikia under the entry for Roger Corman. It's actually a clip. It looks like it was some kind of Q&A. And he goes, and this is his response. If you don't have any ability yourself, maybe you can make money by making fun of those who do.
If you don't have any ability yourself, maybe you can make money by making fun of those who do.
Oh, man. Well, I'm disappointed in that response.
Yeah, that made me really dislike him. If you've listened to the recent episode of WTF with Joel Hodgson, which everybody should listen to immediately, you would know that Joel is one of the most intuitively creative people that exist these days. Like, he is just, like, that is just the way he lives in the world, is creatively. So I really resented Corman's suggestion that he is parasitically living off of other people's talent.
I have a theory about Corman's ire here, and just off the top of my head, if he's mad at Mystery Science Theater 3000 in any way, it's probably because it's the one thing he couldn't create an even cheaper version of.
So I love segment 3, where Joel and the bots are imitating the couple from the movie, and they're kind of jibing each other, and they're insulting the food, and it gets really mean really quickly. And there's this whole subscript about drunks and slight emotional abuse. And I think one of my favorite lines was, "Oh, was that the pudding? I thought the dog had thrown up." And I don't know why, but that to me is also like the perfect example of 90s humor, just cutting and nasty for no real reason, but because it's so clever, you're willing to let it go.
It Conquered the World fun fact number 2. This inspired a Frank Zappa song called Cheapness, which is all about crummy effects and bad monster movies, and has an entire opening monologue about It Conquered the World specifically. Most of the details are right, although Zappa characterizes Beverly Garland as an ankle-twisting screamer, which is so not jibing with reality there.
Another thing I liked from the segments was the imitation of the short with the various winter sports. And at one time, there's a frozen cat, and they crack the cat open, which is surprisingly violent. But also it made me think there is something innately funny about a frozen cat.
That gave me the willies. Another weird way that the experiment lives on is that there's an SCTV episode called Zontar, in which a cabbage from another planet is the pod that takes over the station under the orders of Zontar, played by John Candy. And it actually does, beat for beat, several moments from both versions of this movie, including the secret ham radio that can contact outer space. But in the SCTV version, an enraged DeForest Kelley prevents it from conquering the world.
Another one from the segments. At the prologue, Joel makes the comment about his ventriloquist dummy, Crow. He's a woozle and his name is Peanut, which is actually, I discovered, a line from one of Jeff Dunham's bits back in the 80s. I was astonished to find out that Jeff Dunham had been working for so long. I guess I think of him as a very recent kind of reactionary comic. But apparently he had been working in the same set as Joel Hodgson when he was a stand-up comedian in the early 80s. Who knew?
Yeah, I tended to think of him as a flash in the pan, but then I remembered like weird early 90s appearances from him and his gaggle of puppets on Just for Laughs. Thanks, CanCon. Now, I wanted to talk specifically about the ending of this movie. I'm just getting a text from, it's from Peter Graves. And he's written, he learned almost too late that man is a feeling creature and, because of it, the greatest in the universe. He learned too late for himself that men have to find their own way. It's continuing on another text. To make their own mistakes. There can't be any gift of perfection from outside ourselves. When men seek such perfection, they find only death. Fire, loss, disillusionment. The end of everything that's gone forward. Men have always sought an end to the toil and misery, but it can't be given. It has to be achieved. There is hope, but it has to come from inside, from man himself.
If I was grading that paragraph, I would give it a C+.
Yeah, it's not great, is it?
It kind of wanders. thematically. Yes, this is the way the movie ends, with this soliloquy where Peter Graves says he learned almost too late that man is a feeling creature, and because of it, the greatest in the universe. He learned too late for himself that men have to find their own whale. That men have...
Yeah, this was the prequel to Free Willy, wasn't it?
Moby Dick.
He learned too late for himself that men have to find their own way, to make their own mistakes. There can't be any gift of perfection from outside ourselves. When men seek such perfection, they find only death, fire, loss, disillusionment, to the end of everything that's gone forward. Men have always sought an end to the toil and misery, but it can't be given. It has to be achieved. There is hope, but it has to come from inside, from man himself.
Now, Beth,
Yeah?
it's interesting that you mention that because I'm reminded of something my mother once told me. He learned almost too late that man is a feeling creature, and because of it, the greatest in the universe. Yeah, this is how the movie ends, and spectacularly, this is how the episode ends, no less than, I think, 4 times they use this speech.
Yeah, and what did you think of that effect?
Oh, it was hysterical. This is one of the best drawn-out gags that I have ever seen in a TV show in a long time. And I think, wasn't this inspired, as they mentioned in like an earlier sketch, that the movie's really short, so they have to pad things out in those segments?
Thanks. Yeah, that was definitely part of it. And I should know this, but I don't know if this is before or after the classic repetition comedy example from The Simpsons with Sideshow Bob stepping on a rake about 50 times.
This episode predates Cape Fear.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah. Are there any like particular like running gags, or not running gags, but I guess super drawn out gags that you like, or kind of like stick out in memory along the lines of Man is a Feeling Creature and Sideshow Bob?
The only one that comes to mind immediately, and I can see why most comedies try to avoid this, because you really have to kind of trust your audience to work through it with you and see the meta level of it. But the only other example I can think of is Family Guy, where Peter Griffin hurts his knee and he just goes for about 45 seconds. And it's kind of funny.
I remember that was used as like a promo when they started airing reruns of that show on Adult Swim like a decade ago, when it was like canceled for the second time before being brought back, like the hideous Frankenstein's monster it is. But I'm reminded of like off the top of my head, there's like a ton of really funny ways, because it's at this point almost like a game of comedy chicken. Like, it's daring you to walk away from this extremely drawn-out joke. And as I said earlier, I'm a little disappointed that the Best Brains for the stinger didn't play the speech in its entirety, because that would have been just so perfect. It's like again and again and again, the full, long, rambling, not great speech. But like, I'm reminded of, did you ever see the other puppet comedy show, Wonder Shows?
I've seen clips of it, yes.
Yeah, there's an episode that is kind of devoted to like the same principle. There's an episode called Patience, which is about like drawing out the and it starts off with things getting slowed down. The audio starts getting slower and slower. Eventually the episode starts playing backwards.
Yeah, I feel like if anybody was going to do the repetition bit, or at least play with it, it would be an Adult Swim comedy of some kind. So that makes sense.
Oh, I think that aired on MTV. But
Wonder Shows it was MTV?
I don't remember. But and the other thing that comes to mind, and I think we've talked about this before. Like, you were a fan. Were you a fan of Duckman way back when?
I was, yeah. It was good.
Yeah, I enjoyed that, and that very much is like a comedy about a 90s asshole with point of view. It's a very 1990s show.
Very.
That was a great show for meta humor, and one of my favorite gags is in an episode called Haunted Society Plumbers, where Duckman and Cornfed are plumbers, and in order to be the first in the phone book, they make their name A1 Plumbing.
Mm-hmm.
And this leads to an exchange where they arrive at a high society ball, and the butler, the hostess of the party, and at least one guest keep asking, it's like, oh, are these the guys from A1 Plumbing? Yes, they're from A, and it goes on for, I think I marked the times. It was like, starts at 1 minute and 57 seconds, goes on to 3 minutes and 8 seconds.
Yeah, that's commitment to the bit.
That's what it's about. Like, I love that. It's like comedy chicken. Like I said, there's a tension to it because it starts off funny, it gets annoying, and then it's kind of funny with how annoying it is at that point. It's nothing short of amazing.
Yeah, I think someone described the rake bit to me is that it makes your audience go through some stages. Like, it's funny, and then it gets boring, and then it gets a little distressing, and then it becomes really funny because it's still going. And it's become ridiculous at that level. Yeah, you get a weird sense of like a mini catharsis when these long running gags are done.
The only other thing with that I was thinking of was like the straight up repetition and the repetition with slight variations.
I was going to talk about that because it seems like most people, like most writers, when they do this, it will be repetition on a theme, so it doesn't get too repetitive. And what is really admirable is if you could make it work and nothing about the repeated bit changes. I think that's much harder to do.
Yeah, and I think it's almost all the funnier for that reason is that we get the speech, then we get Joel and the bots watching the speech on TV, then we get Frank and Dr. F watching the speech on TV, then the speech plays during the entire credits.
One of the things that I think is interesting about that, and that kind of makes it work, is that because it's being presented in slightly different ways each time, the sound quality is slightly different.
Oh, yeah.
So like the way it sounds in the theater versus the way it sounds on Joel's TV versus the way it sounds on the Mads TV it does actually slightly change it to keep it a little fresh before going back to the way it sounded in the movie twice.
That is a good point, Chris. Thank you for breaking in.
I think that covers everything that we wanted to say about MST3K episode 311. Chris, did we get any random questions from a listener?
We sure did. Sean from Michigan. Should I say Scon from... Anyway, Sean from Michigan asks, who was the better Darrin, Dick York or Dick Sargent?
Do you have strong Bewitched thoughts?
I don't think I ever really saw Dick Sargent. It was always Dick York when I was watching it on Nick at Night back in the day. But I did research this topic, and it was quite sad because Dick York had to leave because of really terrible back problems, and he became addicted to painkillers. And Dick Sargent, they switched it, which I think was one of the first instances where they had done this in a show, and it did not go well. The ratings sunk like a stone shortly afterwards, and then it got canceled, which wasn't Dick Sargent's fault. So I feel bad for both actors.
Yeah. Equally tragic is that I have a rare visual condition where I can't tell either actor apart.
Well, I think that's what they were hoping for.
It worked on me.
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you've learned almost too late that man is a feeling creature and because of it the greatest in the universe, if you've learned too late for yourself that men have to find their own way to make their own mistakes, that there can't be any gift of perfection from outside ourselves, that when men seek such perfection, they find only death, fire, loss, disillusionment, the end of everything that's gone forward, that men have always sought an end to the toil and misery, but it can't be given, it has to be achieved, that there is hope, but it has to come from inside, from man himself. Or, if you'd like to ask Beth and Adam a random off-topic question, get in touch with us. Email us at info@itsjustashow.com, visit our website at itsjustashow.com, or we're on Twitter at It Is Just a Show. We'd love to hear from you. And if you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned on this episode of It's Just a Show, you'll find links at our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/7. For legal reasons, we're going to be taking the next week off, and we'll have a little filler episode from some cast-offs from the previous bits. But after that, we're going to try to shake things up, get ourselves back into gear, and start fresh by beginning a special series where we look at each of the three hosts' first episodes. And the first episode we're going to be looking at is Season 1, Episode 1, The Crawling Eye.
It conquered the eye.
Here it goes. The season even the writers didn't want us to see.
Yeah, they kept these hidden from view. And with my very first experiences with Season 1, I would say rightly so. I'm not looking forward to this.
Let's treat it as an interesting science project.
I have a counter proposal. Let's just scrape this podcast. And what we're going to do is I have a proposal for a new podcast. It's going to be called Whip It Good. And that's where Beth and I do whippets and watch the good one.
I'd be up for that. Well, maybe we'll actually end up finding something interesting about it. It has been at least 20 years since I attempted to watch anything from season 1. On that note, I think it's time for us to go. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Yep. Good night, Moon. 13. Good night, other things. I don't know.
Okay, take it away.
He learned almost too late. Man is a feeling creature, and because of it, the greatest in the universe. He learned too late for himself, and have to find their own way, make their own mistakes. He learned almost too late that man is a feeling creature. There can't be any gift of perfection from outside himself. When men seek such perfection, they find only death, fire, loss, disillusionment. In the end, everything is gone forward. He learned almost too late. Man is a feeling almost too late. Man is a feeling. Because of it, the greatest in the universe. He learned almost too late. And have to find out man is a feeling. It can't be given. It has to be achieved. Men have always sought an end, toil, misery. It can't be given. It has to be achieved. Result. It has to come from inside man himself. It has to come from inside man himself.
He learned too late for himself that men have to find their own way.